Well, all right, spaceman. The time has come once again. Austin, how you doing?
Good enough.
Good enough. A 2025 vibe, if ever there was one.
Yeah,
All right, so
it's not an
before we
admission. It's a brag. It's an achievement. Good enough is
fine.
good
All
enough.
right.
Good enough can be hard won.
Yeah, that's true. Reframe that up. We should tell people that we have spent quite a bit of time, more than is sane, if anything, trying to shoehorn a 40K reference into the episode, and it just devolved into kind of pornography.
Yeah, would you say it just wouldn't fit? That we just kept
fit.
shoving.
It kept slipping out. It just got away from it. Yeah, the flesh was willing, I mean, it happens to the best of us, at least once. So we just want to let people know we gave it our best shot. They may come up, they may suddenly arise. Some of the cast-offs of effort to get that. Like, we were sliding down the shaft. There was all kinds of it was like, man, we're already going to be talking about Uranus in this episode anyway, so let's try and keep it at least PG. But I just want to let people know.
Uranus is not one of the players.
Exactly. But speaking of parental guidance, give us some parental guidance. We also need a space baby update, as is tradition.
Oh, God. So, it's been like 3 oceans of time since we last podcasted it, like 3 oceans of baby time. Mm-hmm. He's super healthy. He's gigantic. He's just under 30 pounds. He's my smiling little kettlebell of sunshine. What's funny is I took up deadlifting to try to be able to have a strong enough back to lift my baby child, who's 14 months now. And it's helped, but Uppy's picking up and carrying. I guess he's technically a toddler now. He's been walking like crazy for like 3 months. Is much harder than heavy deadlifting. And I found a random comment on a random YouTube short where somebody said that, and I've never felt more validated in my life.
So how does Caitlin handle it? Do you have some sort of medieval trebuchet set up so you can get airborne and she can catch?
I do. I'm the only one who will carry him, will like walk him to bed for 20 minutes. Grandma, Kate will pick him up, and Grandma will pick him up. It's just that I do when extended pickups are called for.
Understood.
I'm brought in, but my back is sore, but not permanently misaligned. And when I wake up and I'm just like, oh, it just hurts. It's not like twisted or broken. It's always exciting, right? Because the muscles will heal. It's the misalignments. But he's I don't know. He's literally the light of my life. It's amazing and it's exhausting. I don't think it's less exhausting, but I think Kate and I have gotten a lot better at managing what exhaustion there is. It's no longer a surprise. As any parent probably would know, like what's exhausting changes. I don't have to constantly follow around 6 inches behind him like when he was first starting to walk, because he would do a header into anything and I had to be prepared to catch him. Now it's, now he can run around and do stuff and just make sure that, he's not fishing cat turds out of the litter box. Yeah. What's funny is he knows like the gross out reflex hasn't seemed to have kicked in, but he knows that we don't want him by the cat box. And so there's a little door that mostly covers it. When it's open, he'll walk over and just point accusingly at the open cat box and then pretend like he's going to go get it and giggle. The awareness of what I'm not supposed to do is funny has definitely kicked in.
Excellent. All right. So with the business formalities out of the way, let's talk, as we usually do, let's do a look back on the first 6 months and what we were talking about and how all of that went, and let's just, I don't know, have a parade for the end of the eternal Mars season, amongst other things. But let's look back at what we're talking about for the first half of the year and see what the major players were and how it all went.
Yeah, well, so one of the things, the first 2 months, January and February, it was just Mars. It was Mars stuff, and so we had Mars stuff. We had like a giant fire, and we had anger. We had anger and fire. The thing that I was maybe even not skipping past, but really excited to get to was the March April stuff, which was the Carnival of Chaos, which wasn't one configuration. It was just there were like 5 different things which all spoke to chaos. And I believe, I probably used the circus metaphors with you because that's what kept coming to me. Because it wasn't like war. It wasn't like explicit violence, but it was enough chaos to be destructive, but not, how should we say, not like I shoot you with a gun destructive, but like, whirlwind. The whirlwind just happens to take things apart or disrupt things by being there. I felt pretty validated when that happened, and there was the tariff hilarity madness. Like, I don't know, are things going to cost? Is it going? Are they going to cost triple? Are they going to cost half? Like, nobody knew, and the markets were similarly confused. It was really interesting to see what that chaos was, because I feel like that delivered perfectly on the promise of chaos. But I wouldn't have guessed, oh, it's going to be tariff policy, but it was, and it was a perfect delivery system. And, there was one thing I remember, there was one in the middle that you're like, but can you be more specific than chaos everywhere? And I was like, there's this thing with Iran, with the Aries ingress chart where Mars is right on the degree of the ascendant. And that really looks like that generally means war or at war for a country. And there was, during the chaos, there was some military assets were moved closer to Iran and all that, but it didn't really go off until really just this last week. And so, there's the Mars on the degree of the Aries ingress for Iran, and we'll see where that goes. Yeah. One thing I will say about June is I definitely think I haven't gone back and scrutinized everything I said, but I believe I undersold the Mars-Uranus square here in the middle of June, or like first half of June. There is nice stuff. There is the Venus in Taurus and the Jupiter in Cancer, and the rest of June will have more of that and get to flavor more of the rest of the month. But I do think I undersold the Mars-Uranus, possibly just because I was getting sick of talking about Mars.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. It's the middle. There's like a double chaos. Well, double click. I'll just say corporate in the middle of June, because there was like, I'm thinking with the Jupiter-Saturn square, and I was watching the Solari report, Money and Markets, and on that, John Titus, in reference to the Iran operation, said this is for all the marbles, because obviously that's where China gets 80% of its oil from Iran. So, we've spoken before about, it will be an historian's game as to when we date World War III to. But John made the good point, is that you could make the case that World War III began with Israel attacking Iran, because it's for all the marbles. It is a play for continued Anglo-American dominance in a specific organizational mode, which brings it, I think, because it's like when I think about that square and the conjunction at the end of 2020, it's like the first test of the plan. It's like, okay, the plan is a worldwide control grid that remains under Anglo-American remit. And that requires, managing hydrocarbon flows into the rest of, the next few decades. So I've been sitting with That's interesting because I was looking for like, okay, what's the Jupiter-Saturn square and how does it tie to a digital currency you will own nothing kind of energy of the beginning of that. And so I've like Iran's interesting to me because it plainly has further to run in Armstrong's model. It's July and August, so it expands regionally and then becomes a quagmire. So the proper war stuff, as we've always said, can't believe I'm saying this, where people are fucking bombing Iran, but like the proper war stuff is still next year and so on. But it's super
Yeah, there
interesting. I like
is.
that
Yeah,
frame, like that this is for all the marbles. And if you tell me in 5 years' time in your essay that you think World War III started with this moment because of its wider, much wider implications and how quickly bigger powers will get in, I'll be like, yeah, fair enough. This is shooting an archduke. Why not?
okay. Yeah, or yeah. The arch. It's well, it's sort of moving a chess piece in so that it
Exactly.
threatens all the
Exactly.
marbles.
Yeah. But it's the play because if you're trying to understand what and it is a fool's errand to try to understand what's going on in his head at the best of times. But if you try to understand what the hell are you doing, Mr. President, when your campaign was the complete opposite of this, and it has 16% popularity in the country, what are you doing? You have to be thinking like, oh yeah, it's part of a play for all the marbles. And so I've been sitting with what is the Jupiter Saturn square? What is the thing in the world that ties to that end of 2020 story the best? And it's funny how that works with astrology, where you can go, well, on the surface of it, like Netanyahu has been trying to get the Americans to destroy his enemies since the early 80s with the same
Mhm.
story of nuclear bombs. Uh, why is it suddenly working? And you go, oh, okay. Yeah, all the marbles. So that's just in terms of when we talk about June. Obviously, Mars Uranus is the fucking unpredictable pyrotechnics of it. But like, how does it accord with the biggest story
Right, with the
of the
longer
year?
story, because
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Mars squares Uranus twice every 2 years,
yeah.
and conjoins it once a year or once every 2 years, etc. I think that's a really interesting. Yeah, I think that's an interesting and good observation. And as far as it ties into that very tangible Jupiter Saturn story, right, which is that is the traditional astrology measuring stick and time unit for looking at observable, recordable history. And so that those conjunctions move in 20-year increments. And so this square is literally the movement from the first quarter to the second quarter.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at that 2020 to 2040 time period. Yeah, that's I hadn't considered it that way, but that's good. I was
No,
just waiting for Jupiter to get free of Saturn so that Jupiter could do good Jupiter things for me.
yes. We've all been waiting
Selfishly.
for like, yeah, we've all been waiting for Santa to show up in the middle of the year. Believe me, and we'll get there. But it hadn't really occurred to me until I watched this week's Money in Markets, and he said this is for all the marbles, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, it is, and it's a step change in the same story. Like it's that, and that's why I think you can future predict with it, or you can subtextually analyze with it. Like, because at the moment it's like, well, is this just some sort of chaotic mental making it up as everyone goes along, such as the tariffs? It's like, no, it all signs point to it being part of a play for all the marbles.
Yeah, and again, yeah, part of America's relationship to Iran
Yeah.
since the revolution in '79. I mean, where did where did Saddam Hussein get the weapons? Well, Iraq had a friend in invading Iran right after the revolution. Like this is an old story, or this is a story that's literally 1 month younger than me. The post-revolutionary or the revolutionary government in Iran, when I was looking up charts, it became official like 3 weeks, 3 weeks after I was born, 3.5 weeks. And so I was like, I know this chart.
Yeah, there
I
you
went,
go.
I went to high school with this chart. This was my buddy Brad, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's the Aries of '79. Yeah, they're a little wacky.
Yeah. So just going back to that like Carnival Chaos period in the same episode of Money in Markets, Catherine said, with what's happened, you have to understand the attacks on Syria and Hezbollah as essentially removal of of Iranian forces, because
Yeah.
that's how you do it. So that times with what you actually said first time anyway. I just wanted to point out that if you actually look at the first quarter when they were conducting those operations in Syria and against Hezbollah, against Lebanon, that's plainly removing vanguard Iranian forces in the lead up to the thing that they're doing now.
Right. And do you remember the mysterious gigantic explosion at the Iranian port a couple months ago? Right. Which I think we can say mystery solved at this point. I was holding on. I was suspending belief/disbelief. I was like, well, it certainly looks suspicious. Accidents do happen, but we'll see if future events push interpretation one way or another.
Yes. So what else? I mean, we're in June now, so it's funny. Like, so many big things have happened and so many big changes towards the end of the first half of the year that, like, they haven't had time to sink in yet. Big outer planets and so on that we did mention them in the first half, but they've just happened, so they haven't done a lot yet. And it's like looking at the second half as well. But is there anything else from the first half that we want to talk about? And if not, use some of those big changes to move the story into the next.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about. We should talk a little bit about Jupiter in Cancer, because just moved in like 2 weeks ago, or less than 2 weeks ago, and it'll be there for about another year. The Neptune ingress was really interesting. Saturn, we've only had for about 3.5 weeks. Hard to differentiate from the Neptune on a collective level. Very easy on a personal level.
That's very true.
Yeah, if you have early Aries stuff like I do, like Kate does, like you do, like it moved onto my Mercury and it was like instantly delays to writing projects and headaches, which I don't usually get. I was like, okay, that's what I would have expected if it were, if I were talking to a client.
I had my eyes on because it's conjunct my moon. I had my eyes on that conjunction, and I missed Saturn's move through the anaretic degrees of my fifth house, which were with little hyperbole, like quasi-suicidally depressing. It was awful. And that was worse than so far the Saturn visiting my moon has been quite good, and it's brought like structure to health goals. It's actually been quite good. So that's what I had my eyes on, and I hit this like week and a half to 2 weeks before of like, oh my God, what the hell is happening to me? And that was my unpleasant Saturn ingress surprise. It was winding up some of the really wringing out my fifth house cloth, I think, at the end.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the malefics at the very end of Pisces have a very Requiem for a Dream vibe.
Was not I was planning too far ahead. I was not ready for that. But I think you're right. We haven't had enough time yet, and we'll certainly see how a lot of them play out. Very excited for Jupiter in Cancer personally. I want this to be the Gordon transit because my birthday is next week, my 27th, obviously, on the 25th. So, and I will be at Inti Raymi, which is the festival of the sun for the Kazemi, the day before. And then I have the new moon in Cancer on my birthday. And from that day, I will be in a 9th house perfection. So my perfections are tracking Jupiter which has been great. But this one, as we descend into proper World War III, it's like, oh, I'm all right. My chart's looking pretty good. I've got Saturn out of my 5th house. Things are looking good. But I'm very excited for, my Cusco Santa visit next week. And I saw a video Cass Tyndall put out, shout out to Cass, about this being probably the best new moon of the year. So if you're watching this promptly when it came out, the new moon in the middle of next week, wherever you are, is one to play with.
It's nice. It would be nice if Saturn wasn't still in almost a perfect square with it. And so it's beautiful and wonderful and more than capable of taking that weight, but it has to take the weight. Right. So here's some blessings that you better use to meet these standards, to mitigate these very real problems, to circumvent these very real obstacles. And, arguably that's kind of a blessing because the blessing has an immediate use case. But it's not a, how should I say, it's not a freebie. One thing I would note about the sun's conjunction with Jupiter in Cancer and then the new moon right after that is that, when a planet is not capable of shining with its own light, like you can't see it rise or set, it's sort of devoured by the sun's light, it's harder to get external effects. But arguably it's a really good time to get unseen effects or things to charge the latent or invisible layer of things. There was actually the Jupiter Sun Cazimi in Pisces some years ago was on my birthday, and I felt I wanted to max that. And there is in the Picatrix, there is a very long prayer petition / speech to Jupiter for really good luck for 1 year. And I did that on that birthday. And boy, did I turn a lot of things around that year. And so that's free. If you have that book, just look it up. It's in the Jupiter petition section. It felt like exactly the right move for that invisible but powerful moment rather than asking for specific things.
It's funny you mentioned that because I was just doing some mesa work in lieu of going back to Cusco in 2 days. And so Inti Raymi is obviously the festival of Inti, the sun god. And it's an ancient festival, but it's a new festival. It's actually part of the recovery of the Andean Quechua identity in the last 30 or 40 years. They've brought it back and whatever. It's really cool. And I have foreign dignitary. I think I was telling you, I have VIP foreign dignitary seats. I think I'm going to be sitting with Peruvian politicians. I'm not sure yet. There's a catered lunch and buses and things. So that should be fun. But the guidance around the new moon as well was particularly interesting. New moons being good for visioning and manifestation. And that was the stuff that comes through is it's not a magic lamp. It is a window to vision patiently and clearly and then let it go. It's real Neville Goddard stuff of I will visualize this completely and then ignore it and then let reality unfold as it's going to in that general direction.
Well, that's almost Neville Goddard versus or meets Austin Osman Spare.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's really good. So anyway, fun time for me for a birthday trip next week. Is there anything else for H1? Or more specifically, we're going to talk about Jupiter and Cancer and
that takes I think we're good on specific lookbacks. But so I was thinking about Jupiter and Cancer yesterday, and I think I had an insight. So I have that, and I have that on the degree of the rising. So I should be able to look at the way that I approach things, or at least something good that I do and find it. And I was thinking about, I was like, okay, it's Jupiter's in its exaltation, meaning you get the best results from Jupiter in the place of the moon, right? It is exalted in the house of the moon. And I was thinking about, I was just problem solving for myself. And I was like, oh, what I really need right now. And I was like, oh, I think that might be a Jupiter and Cancer specialty, is being able to figure out, being really good, because Jupiter is knowledge in a truth way, not a clever way like Mercury. Mercury is data and Jupiter is knowledge. But having the truth of something. And I was like, oh, I think it might be knowing what you really need, or being able to figure out what you really need. Or, that's for me because it's in the first house, but I was thinking of a friend of mine that has it in the 7th. And I was like, they are so good at figuring out what other people really need. Not necessarily what they say they need, but what they really need. And if you can see that and even half-ass address it, if you have that level of targeting, if you're actually pointing at the thing that would make the most difference, you're going to get you're gonna get a lot of bang for your buck, right? Because you're addressing what is actually needed. And it reminded me of, or like early on with Lucian, Kate looked over at me and she was like, "You're really good at figuring out what he needs." She's like, "I don't know if you're the best at like executing on that." She's like, "But you've got a real eye for what he needs at a given time." And anyway, all that kind of flashed in my head yesterday. I was like, I think there's something to that. And that's very Jupiter in the place of the moon, right? Like moon being needs, not just like whiny, annoying needs,
No.
including whiny, annoying needs, right? Including I'm hungry, I need to poop. But the soul too has needs that are just as urgent and just as disastrous, if not addressed, that are in that same lunar key.
I love that. It's a homework or action point for people listening and watching. So, where's Cancer for you? Let this be a moment. Let this be a window in time when you explore what is really needed, like what you really need. That's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. That accords with some of my plans for Rune Soup in general for the second half of the year, where it is in my 9th, because I will be offering like it's going to be called the Shaman's Devil, but like shadow work projects, and so one that people can join. So that's entirely that stuff. So feeling pretty good that I got that time. Hooray for my 9th house perfection. Love it.
Yeah, that's a nice place. That's a nice place and a nice time to have it. But yeah, and how many devils are just hungry?
Look, the devil is the lord of the underworld, which is the shadow, and look, he's a being of light. Like we have all the tools shamanically to do that, and it's transformed my life the last couple of years of doing shadow work in this way. So now the time has come to facilitate the surfacing for other people of what it is they really need that has been kept in the darkness. So I like that. I love that for me. Awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. So something that's going on now, right, will be going on for a chunk of H2, will be our friend mostly for most of the next 13 years after this, is Neptune and Aries, right? The dream, like that encapsulating dream, just like Neptune's orbit encapsulates all of the other planets proper, right? Which kind of changes the framing of everything and the lighting of everything without necessarily moving a single thing. And so, as soon as that moved in, I had my suspicions and I've been watching it. And I'm curious if if you've noticed anything. One thing I've noticed, one thing that I took as sort of an omen, thing I was expecting is, as we were talking about it, like Aries is pretty tradition, it's pretty butch, pretty masculine. And we're coming into this like clearly wartime or time for war period, and like people getting excited about being combat ready, or at least looking combat ready. And this is in big contrast to the like very sort of infinite compassion for everybody Neptune and Pisces era. But Neptune is the dream, the ideal, the image, and sometimes like the bullshit of the thing. And so randomly, like right after the ingress, YouTube showed me one of the like weightlifting videos, right? If you watch one video on weightlifting, YouTube will just fucking barrage you. And there was a guy who one of the weightlifting guys put out a video about getting plastic surgery to address this thing. Like this is somebody who had like 8% body fat, but it wouldn't go away from this one area. He wanted to be very transparent. And so it was his whole like plastic surgery journey. And I was like, oh, this is definitely part of it. Like looking even more masculine with plastic surgery. And like after, this is somebody who's like lifted weights their entire adult life and has that little mini Hulk shape. But that like, that desire to fit the image, which we have with Neptune, it like Neptune doesn't care if it's a special effect, doesn't care what exogenous chemicals or hormones you're taking in. Doesn't care if it's from a surgeon's knife. Likes the real thing just as much, but Neptune just wants it to be wants it to look right in the movie. Right in the movie of the mind's eye. And so anyway, this guy put out this video and I was like, okay, Neptune and Aries, like sign of the times.
I like that. Well, I agree completely. I've been watching. So it sounds to me, Neptune and Aries, the animated Hercules Disney films theme song is "Go the Distance," and it's the story of a hero, in this case Hercules, setting. All Disney songs are the same. It's the same as the Moana song. Like they're all about like setting out and becoming the person that you like, hero's journey stuff, right? And that's everywhere. And that's what this is. Like it's the beginning of the pursuit of individual shining and glory, but glory sounds a bit more martial than it needs to be. It's funny, because the really basic take, and it's nevertheless true, is that the Pisces era is the woke era, and here we are in the Aries era. And that's true, but we could probably describe it in a more useful way. There are men's haircut trends that seem counterintuitive, because you'd think the Aries era would be back to buzz cuts, and it's the opposite. The buzz cut, like in the Piscean era, the woke era, everyone had the same purple bowl haircut, let's say. But the men's haircare trends now are trending longer, and more specifically longer because each haircut is individualized to the shape of the skull and where your hairline is and how it falls down. Because I was watching a video about that myself. Thank you, YouTube gods, going, oh, this is Neptune and Aries, because it's actually the shining of the individual, because the fades, which I have like down the sides here, is quite uniform. It's actually far more collective than you think. And whilst it might look technically martial, the haircut trends are actually the beginning of the uniqueness of you, and like delighting in the beauty of that, and the expression of, this is what my hairline and my skull looks like. And so the hair trends have actually gone very Neptune and Aries. But I'm seeing it everywhere as like the song from Hercules, because it's the beginning of a long journey towards individual excellence and glory. And that's there culturally everywhere, because you can look underneath the move to war and cultural patterns and the return of daily vlogging and so on as that one story expressing in people's different local space-time conditions.
Yeah, well, I think that's a I think you got at the healthy core of that dream, which was not going to be equally accessible to everyone, or that will easily that people will forget halfway through. But yeah, like the individuality and the one's own distinct glory, or the glory of the glory that is that is natural to a specific person, because they have that combination of weaknesses and strengths and mistakes and victories. Like that's like the healthy version.
And the cultural approval of same, right? So that there's less of a tall poppy, so that you are celebrated for getting yours in a way that, whereas before it was more like, let's have a 20-person human relations struggle session about this, is more like, no, he's like, she's off doing a thing. Like that's what it is.
I think that's true.
The shadow side, but which I'm sure you're about to tell us. But that there's a cultural approval on the pursuit of individual glory in a way that it's showing up everywhere that I can see. Anyway.
Well, that's great. Yeah, that's good. I'm glad you're seeing that, and I hope I see more of that. I certainly haven't not seen that. But that hasn't been what my eyes picked up. I think I've been looking more for the pathological, or noticing the pathological more.
Yeah, fair enough. Which will certainly come, as you say. This is a rather long transit. I'll be 29 by the time it's done, Mike.
Yeah, we're going to get a lot of versions of this.
So would you say that's the biggest? I mean, it's funny, like it's the biggest news because it happens the least often. But is it the biggest slow-moving transit news for
Well, Neptune is by definition never foreground,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's literally like, as far as actual planets go, it's always in the background. And so it has a unique power being always in the background, but it also means it's really easy to miss. And if you're looking for it in the foreground, like you will see it affect planets that are in the foreground, be like, your costuming and makeup was 100% done by Neptune and Aries. I can see Neptune and Aries by the way this scene is lit, but you don't see that like dramaturge in the, like the dramaturge never enters the frame. So yeah, so as important as things get while in the background, Jupiter, Jupiter is foreground. It hasn't gotten, there's only been sort of, I felt the Jupiter in Cancer. I felt like a breeze blow through my mind. And I was like, that's Jupiter in Cancer. It's invisible right now. Had to get through the square with Saturn. It has to do the conjunction with the sun and then emerge, which it will during the second half of July. It will emerge under its own light, right? And then we'll get to see things that are distinctly, obviously good Jupiter in Cancer things. But
speaking of July, shall we?
So yeah, the big news is Uranus. It's finally happened. The age of prophecy has arrived. Uranus is finally entering Gemini. It's on July 6th, 7th, and it's only a 7-year transit, but it is the 7 years, which kind of always rearranges everything, especially for the United States. The Revolutionary War was declared right after Jupiter went into Gemini. The Civil War got hot in the United States not long after Jupiter entered Gemini. Uranus entered Gemini. And then what's interesting is Uranus and Gemini does not time World War II, but it times the United States entrance into World War II perfectly. It happens in 1941, like about halfway through 1941. Whereas, if you lived in China or Poland, like war had been going on for years and years and years, or even France at that point. But it timed the United States entrance into World War II. And, those last 3 instances certainly changed the fate and state of the United States, internally and externally in in all of the cases, and also had a significant impact on the rest of the world. So we enter that period. We get the pilot episode this summer.
That's coming back to 40K. We were trying to work out how to, because the first episode was called Just the Tip of the Chainsword, which is the first half of the year. Then we had to call it the Pullout or even the Gape, because there is a window of time which isn't like a holiday in the second half of the year, but the sword isn't in. It gets pulled back out, and that backward chainsaw process does actually begin in July. And then back it goes for next year. So that we tried everything to get it to work, and it literally just turned into bait bus. So
it just got grosser.
Yeah,
it just got grosser and more violent. A chainsword Gape was proposed, but it's not that kind of business. It's not that kind of show.
No, it's a family show in theory.
Right, and so just a little bit on the timing of that. So Uranus moving into Gemini is a big thing on its own, but it's the Uranus in Gemini, which once it's there is now in an almost perfect trine with our friend Pluto in Aquarius. This fearful future, fear of the future, best symbolized, best represented in the news right now by AI. and then the Neptune in Aries, this how should we say, bold new dream. All three of those those slow moving planets not only are made ingresses within about the same time or within a similar time frame, but they're all in very closely aligned degrees, and so they are all going to be fortifying each other. I was trying to come up with a name for this, and so in the H1 I talked about like the flying wedge, which is sort of an unstoppable plow, because that's the shape it forms, and we'll have that wedge for the rest of the decade, and then early into the next one, after a brief message from our sponsors, right? So, and we have Saturn at the tip right now too, with Neptune, and so that I think we'll see the most dramatic action from that configuration during mid-early August, because we have Mars will move into early Libra. And so we've got Mars in Libra opposite Saturn, Neptune in Aries. And then it creates a shape almost exactly like a bow and arrow. The top of the bow being Uranus and Gemini, and the bottom of the bow being Pluto and Aquarius. That in modern astrology, that configuration is called a kite. Sure looks like a bow and arrow to me, and it's a bunch of harmonious bending with a massive tension in the middle, and it's a Mars-Saturn tension. So I think that will be the climax of the pilot episode of this configuration, and then. As we head into September, on September 1st, Saturn moves back into Pisces. And then on October 21st, Neptune's back into Pisces. And then in November, Uranus moves back into Taurus. And so there's just this, it sort of gets taken apart one piece at a time, and temporarily replaced with, as far as outer planet configurations that hold, with Neptune and Saturn and the head of the dragon, the North Node, all in the second half of Pisces, which is not should we say is not fast and furious, right? And this is where we were going. We're looking for Nurgle or Plague Marine or Death Guard imagery, because it's so rotten and swampy. And by the way, this Saturn, Neptune, Rahu or the head of the dragon, all at the end of Pisces, that's probably what you were feeling in the lead up to Neptune and Saturn's move, because that's not just Neptune, that's not just Saturn. It's Saturn, Neptune, which is very confusing in and of itself and can be hard on one's hope. But it's also the eclipse point. It's also the more poison-fanged of the two eclipse points. And so we've got that Saturn, Neptune, Rahu back there in at the end of Pisces, which gets really lit up by both of the eclipses in September, which are now in Pisces, Virgo. In early September, we get a lunar eclipse in Pisces with Saturn and the North Node, and then about a day before the equinox, we have an eclipse, a solar eclipse in the very last degree of Virgo, opposite Saturn in the very last degree of Pisces. And that just, as I was telling you, that reeks of entropy to me. Actually, let me tell you a little research thing, or just a little intuition thing that I checked with some research. I was like, God, that feels so entropic. And I was thinking back to something I was trying to feeling match for that. And I went back to when Saturn was in Virgo in 2007, because I remember writing column and all of this sort of harvest imagery, but not the bounty of the harvest, but that the entropic, just the guy, the scarecrow, or the figure of that does the reaping, that brings an end to growth. And I was like, oh, that's when the Lehman Brothers thing was. The Lehman Brothers thing was 4 days, the Lehman Brothers collapse was either 4 or 5 days after a solar eclipse in Virgo on the south node, which we're going to have. And it wasn't opposite Saturn, it was conjunct Saturn.
Right. Okay.
And I was like, that's why there was a feeling match there. And I'm not prophesying that that's exactly what's going to happen, but it had that like deeply entropic feeling. And when I checked, it was exactly one eclipse cycle ago, and also right there with Saturn.
Well, my guess, on account of it being more oceanic, is the Straits of Hormuz or something.
Yep. Saturn in Pisces has been rough on international trade, right? By squeezing the waterways.
Exactly. So this is what we meant by we couldn't use Nurgle for the name of the episode because we didn't want it to code plandemic. But what you said just before we started was really, really good, which was like, imagine you're in a trench in World War One. You're not being shot at, which is good, but you're stuck in a trench and your feet are in this gross water, and so your feet are like decaying off. So it's like, well, I'm not being shot at, but this is the pause that does not refresh.
Yeah, that was your phrase, and I thought that captured it quite well, despite failing at being a 40K reference. Because it's sort of a breather, because the August, like July ramps into August, and again, I expect like the peak experience of the new crazy, which is very kinetic, is in August, and then it'll be like, oh, thank God, like we're not doing that for pretty much the rest of the year. And September's eclipses really take us back into like Pisces, Virgo, earth signs, and water signs. But it's like, oh, but we're just here. And my foot, my foot, like that smell coming from my foot isn't just because I haven't washed it. I don't want to look at it. And we are going to have to charge if we're doing trench warfare as a metaphor, it's like, no, we are going to have to charge the machine gun nests. It's not going to be till next year, but we're just going to wait, right? Without sufficient medical supplies or coverage.
So
just me and my foot.
July, what you said about July, I had a visual of, at the beginning of the Hellboy movie where they're sort of summoning, they're trying to open a portal and summon. It's like summoning to see, oh, this is what they're trying to bring in. Like you get a visualization of it. So it's not summoning like, oh, at the end of the boss level, now we have to fight it. But the configuration allows for clear seeing of oh shit, this really is for all the marbles at some point. And so that accords with the Armstrong model, right? So particularly there are panic cycles in all the Middle East country charts for August.
That tracks.
So it looks like regional expansion ending probably end of August or in September, let's say, with a quagmire of like, okay, let's stop. Nothing's been fixed, but let's all stop this. And it kind of gets Ukrained in a way. And that's what the model's looking like, which also means if it's a Straits of Hormuz closure, the other stuff that's showing up is yet more shortages and inflation and so on, particularly for Europe, because they're now trying to agitate two wars they can't win and shooting themselves in the foot by doing it, because that's where all their stuff comes from. But so that's where the astrology is lining up with Armstrong's forecast model anyway.
That's a good
right on schedule.
And we didn't even talk about that. That's just those are the triple exclamation points. And so just to frame how long the pause that does not refresh lasts. Neptune moves back into Aries at the end of January. Saturn joins it back in early Aries the day before Valentine's Day on February 13th. And then the two make their only exact perfect conjunction shortly thereafter. And then we wait until, I believe, the end of April to get our Uranus in Gemini back. And then they're all just there until I think Uranus leaves. Uranus moves into Cancer for the first time in 2031 and then pops back for a little bit and isn't out for good until 2032. Neptune's in until almost 2040. Pluto's in until almost 2040. Like, that's just the background. It
Yes.
just is what it is.
I-
So yeah, we've got, even though it may not be the most refreshing breather, I do think that there's something nonetheless advantageous about getting this really kinetic. It's not a preview because it's actually happening, but this really kinetic pilot episode of this configuration, especially in August, and seeing what it means, at the micro level, not just at the global power struggle level, and thinking about how to get set up for that. And it, in terms of this reversal, because we're going from, and this is why we kind of got stuck on trying to name around this, because this sort of all in and then back out and wait, and then the hurry up and wait is so clearly the structure of it. From a life perspective, from a lived perspective, individually lived perspective, there's a lot of like trying to keep up with the planets through, into September. And then it'll be the reverse challenge where you have to keep going and, do your calisthenics in the mud.
yes.
Even though it's not an ideal place, and there's nothing about the environment that makes you that makes you want to do jumping jacks, right? It's the opposite of motivating. Although I will say, just about the mud period, there are some really nice, like, weeks or 2 weeks. There's some really nice individual configurations that some people will really benefit from. Like, there's some really nice Mars and Scorpio stuff, which if you and Mars are friends, and you do well with the Scorpio side, there's some excellent Mars in the muck. There's some really beautiful moments for Venus and Libra, and as well as with Jupiter. And so there are some nice benefic moments, especially like second half of October, first half of November. I don't think those are going to change the big macro stories, but I do think they'll be quite meaningfully either useful or pleasant on an individual level. So it's not all going to be swamp for everyone the whole time, but that's a little bit of what it'll look like from a distance. It's a lot of what it'll look like from a distance.
I like that. And so basically, if you're paying attention between now, having really already started, but now and August, end of August, like you will get to see what the new world is going to look like. Well, the new world that
Mhm.
comes in from like what is that, 2 of next year. So there's good in here. It's not, I mean, the world is always ever going to do what it's going to do. And
Yeah, you'll get to see which alignment of forces is going to is going to shape is going to reshape the world. Like, what shape it lands in will probably be several years out. But if you can understand accurately what coalition of forces is deployed and what their pattern is, then you can work with and around that.
yes. And to me, I think that's where John Titus comes in for it. Like by September, you will have seen China um, make its agitation about what's going on um, known. It doesn't mean they're going to like invade Taiwan yet. That's still a ways off. But it's we are seeing in this window. Oh, they really are playing for all the marbles, and it really is about what we've been saying it's about. It's just that stuff all starts happening next year. It's crazy. Like this happened last year as well with the pyrotechnics and so on. This one isn't that because it is actually happening. It's just,
Right.
as you say, the pilot episode. But for people, I can't believe I'm saying this as good news, but it is. Settle in. This isn't it yet. There's still time. This is an exciting opportunity to regulate your own nervous systems because you'll want that as we roll into Q2 of next year and beyond. But it's like you can always see this as insight, as opportunity. Like imagine not knowing. You have the choice of knowing or not knowing, and you can know.
Yeah, and I said, like, knowing about things that aren't positive can be distracting, but if you can adapt to, the fact that you're just living in history and that most history is a pretty ugly game at the macro level, it's really helpful. Like, not being, a little bit of knowledge is all you need to not be in exactly the wrong place at exactly the wrong time, which,
Agreed.
is those are the crosshairs of human misery.
And as you say, like history, it's certainly mixed, right? It's always a mixed story, and at a macro level especially. And you just need to work out what fractal dimension you're on and which one's there, because you're probably not JD Vance. I'm pretty sure he doesn't listed the show, so you don't have a front row seat for the idiocy, and that's another bit of good news.
Yeah, I've seen his
Good
chart.
news is you're not JD Vance. That's what I'm saying.
I will pass on being that fella. Another sort of macro dimension of that switch that we're talking about is, I think, so I the first part, the loud pilot episode part, is, I think, is much more concerned with inter-country relationships.
Yeah.
The United States, Iran, Israel, China, et cetera, whereas the soggy part, I think, is much more internal conflicts, or problems in a variety of countries. I think that that internal shift will speak to, well, how is the resistance to X developing in what country? What's going on behind the scenes with the leadership in the United States, in China, and India, whatever, fill in the blank. And that there'll be some, because there's some rearrangement and internal dissent that is going to, how should we say, play a role in all of these, in these countries sort of getting ready for the loud external part coming up next year.
That's very true. Yes, that's very true. And that'll give us something to talk about.
Oh, there's
in the next one, the Christmas one. Shit. Yeah.
Yeah, the maybe the H1 2026 will be like go loud.
Yeah.
A lot of things go loud.
Yeah. All right, so let's go back to the eclipses, because we did talk about them on a macro level, but let's talk about like a Pisces Libra eclipse party for people on an individual basis. Like, let's let them live their best trench mud eclipse moment.
Okay. So yeah, Pisces Virgo rather than Pisces Libra.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been like half in, half out of the Virgo Pisces and Aries Libra ones up until September. That we've been like on both sides of the axis. Our eclipses in spring, or at the end of Q1, were Aries and then Virgo. Right. So one on one side, one on the other. This pair in September will be the first that's solidly just in Pisces and Virgo. And so we've got the South Node in Virgo, or the tail of the dragon, or Ketu, and the North Node, or Rahu, or the head, in Pisces. And so generally with the tail, or Ketu, you have a clearing, cleansing, exercising, sort of exorcising, more so than push-ups. Exorcising, it's like the stripping away of the spirit from a thing, or the getting rid of everything. It's the dieta. The K2 is dieta. It's like get rid of flush all the junk so that you can, so that the thing is actually what it is, and it's not confused, and the signal is not confused, which is a useful thing that can easily be overdone, right? The South Node is purging, right? And so is useful as a purging influence. What it feels like, and if it's going over planets or it's in a specific house, it feels like a desire. It feels like a distinct lack of hunger in a given area. So the South Node went into Virgo at the very end of January this year, and it's in a prominent place for me. And so I just I wasn't dieting. I just started not eating more than I needed to. I was like, I just stopped eating for hunger. And through happenstance, I was telling you about this, I ended up quitting chewing tobacco. I still do some nicotine, but I like dialed that habit back. And I didn't even think about the K2 transit, but I was like, oh, yeah, there it is. I started, all this started within a week of that. And it's a 1.5 year long thing. And so there's a very easy match, I think, between that purging, letting go, I'm not hungry for that anymore energy, and Virgo. Like, that's not much of a stretch to connect those two.
Agreed. Mine timed some very obvious stuff in my chart too. So I'll actually have a video about that coming out, but exactly to its inverse. I'm like, oh yeah, yep. No friends for me, but like joyously, just working, and it's like, okay.
Yeah, and the K2, you know, a Mars influence can stop you from doing something, but it's like, you know, it's a severance from with hostility, right? Like, oh fuck, you know, fuck doing that. I'm never gonna do that. And K2 is just like, I don't think I need to try so hard in that area. Like, I could just. Like, one of the images that I've used for a long time that I think still works is just, it's the energy of realizing that you're gripping something very tightly in one of your hands and be like, my hand kind of hurts and I don't actually need this. Like, what a relief to be able to to let go. And then I could grab something else with 2 hands, right? Because now I have a hand freed up. Like, how nice. You only have 2.
I framed it. Alex Hormozy talks about there being seasons in your life, and so there are seasons where you work really hard, and there are seasons where you don't because you're raising a family or whatever it happens to be, and it's like an emotionless understanding of, oh, I'm just doing this now. Like, I'm not doing as much of this because I'm doing more of this, and that's just what happens. And it's not. I don't have any energy directed towards it in any way. It's just what it is. So that was my realization. Like, oh, that's what this is. I'm good. I'm not celebrating it, and I'm not upset by it. It's just what's happening.
Yeah, and that's you know, you've found the tail of the dragon when you have that, like, that emotionlessness. It's very if the planets have religions, or if the, you know, these different if the planets have religions, the south node of the moon is absolutely like a very natural Buddhist. It's like, oh, I just don't need to cling to that. That is what it is. And it will be whatever it is when I am no longer trying to make it something else. And so even though the action is of letting go, the result is what happens when you let go. And sometimes the result is not dramatic at all. It's like, oh, it's just there. It didn't run away because I wasn't grasping it, you know, with all my strength, or, you know, or it runs away, or it's no longer there, or it just falls to the ground and then it's on the ground, because that's what happens when you're not carrying something. And what I will say is that's K2 in the background all the time, right? It's going to be there in Virgo for another year and a month or two from now. But when it's activated during an eclipse, which it will be exactly opposite Saturn, day before the equinox, I think it's September 20th, 21st. That will be a whole lot of that energy that all at once. I would say, and how should we say, poison, not because of content, but because of the macro dosage. And so the K2 doesn't have to be a bummer. It can be really helpful and, you know, kind of Buddhist and help save you energy. But that, don't mistake that for the macro dose that comes, that gets injected via an eclipse, especially that one. I think that one's very entropic. The world at large, and like larger societal structures don't do well with with that same sort of releasing energy, because usually they're held together. They're held together tightly and with duct tape. And when there's release, there's often some level of collapse or falling apart, especially when they're not structurally sound.
Yeah, and in that opposition too, like this collapse is final. This is done. All right. So I guess the other side of that is the Pisces.
Yeah, the head of the dragon. So yeah, with the head of the dragon, it's one way to think about it is if K2 or the tail is releasing, Rahu is the trying to grab something with both hands. It's about a depth of hunger rather than shocking disinterest, right? And so, generally speaking, like in Vedic astrology, the head of the dragon is almost always considered to be meaningfully more malefic than the tail. The tail can definitely do some harm, but the head of the dragon has this potential to actively corrupt because it so inspires and mobilizes the desire nature in such a way that it's out of proportion and overwhelms the other more temperate functions. It is not inherently evil, but it's much harder to control, and so people tend to get overattached, spun out. Their appetites and hungers get the best of them. There's damage from overdoing things, right? Which and so in Pisces, right, that in some ways that can be almost anything. Pisces is inherently vast, but I guess one way to think of it is in terms of the dream, right? Like the vision of the life, because Pisces does tend to work from that like larger understanding of the life, like top down, like getting in trying to live the dream, getting too attached to it, looking a certain way, getting too attached to a particular framework, like getting too attached and impatient, and hungry enough to make mistakes in getting there. Like on a very simple level, we could say that South Node in Virgo and North Node in Pisces is let go of the details so that you have enough room for the big picture. And that would be kind of ideal. It's just that both of those forces are inherently confusing to connect with, and that wanting to make room for the big picture. I should say the experience, even though that may be the result, the experience is confusing. The part of the issue with the nodes is that they are the eclipse points, and so part of their very baseline definition is that they interfere with clear visibility. And even if you're getting pulled, and so it's not about seeing something clearly, it's about a pull towards or away from something. Like when we're talking about K2, it's like a feeling that like, oh, I don't think I need to hold on to this. And with Rahu, it's a hunger for something that leads you, and you may not even realize that you've been moving in that direction. You've just been responding to the pull.
Yes, I know exactly what that. Well, I don't because it's eclipses, but where that lands in my chart and where I will be in the world and what I will be doing, I'm like, I know that's going to be a risk of overbalancing towards, well, not experiencing sufficient joy or recreation in my life, and overbalancing to compensate. And that's the story for where I expect I'm going to be in my life for September. Is that's going to be like all of a sudden, like I know what it'll be. It'll be that, and I'll do something.
Yeah, that
really
makes
dumb.
sense.
I'll do something really dumb, like buy a boat, and this isn't it.
Well, and even the description or the way that you describe that, it's like there might be specific actions that we can talk about like after they've happened, but it's like it's from this like, oh well, like this sort of wanting this particular balance to be present in the shape to life and trying to fill in the missing part, but maybe overdoing it. It has that same like macro from the outside big picture Pisces framing to it. And another thing I'll add is, so Pisces is Jupiter ruled, and we're going to be having great Jupiter It'll get interfered with at multiple points, but it's still like the Jupiter, the Jupiter this year. Jupiter is going to be providing this year, and so there's a real chance of sort of ingratitude or overdoing it because you have the opportunity with Jupiter putting out like he's going to for most of the year.
All right, something I will. I'd seen that coming up, and I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure that's what it's going to be because I'll be in another work sprint and probably back on the farm. And when those two things coincide, I can get a little bit. Much as I love the place, like it's not as much fun as living in the middle of a city. And then I have a tendency to be like, oh, I'm not having any fun. I'm gonna book a flight to Hawaii. That was in retrospect not the right decision. So I can kind of see that's where it's going to land for me anyway, but who knows with eclipses. But that's certainly a story that I've been weaving with, and I know it because I did so much work around like the rules of play with my Saturn transit anyway, that I know that there's I was ready for that, as I think I'm going to be.
Right. And when that will be, that the Saturn moves back into Pisces, right, into your fifth house, the house of play, among other things, on September 1st, right before both of these eclipses happen. So we're like back to Saturn in Pisces rules, like immediately before we get both of these.
It's amusing. I will be, as of having just recently booked the flights, I'll be back on the farm for the wet pause that does not refresh. And last year, because obviously it's spring there, it rained continuously for 2.5 months. And I'm like, oh my God. And spirit guidance to send me back at that time. I'm like, I obviously have to do that again and do it right this time. So my quagmire, my I guess trench water will be literal as I go through this, as it sometimes is. Yeah.
Yeah, there's something about, it's like, with all this Pisces, it's like psychedelic trench water.
Okay, no, I'm open to that.
Right. Which is, not promising a good trip, but it's trench water and it's psychoactive.
Nice one. All right. So other than the eclipses, we've done H2. Is there anything else on like individual or microcosm levels that people should have a think about between now and the Christmas season?
I mean, that's the big stuff. We've got, we have Mercury retrogrades. That we get 2 of those. The first one starts on the 17th of July and doesn't get done until the 10th of August, right? So that's like leading into like that 6th to 11th maybe of August is where I'm looking for like peak bow and arrow craziness. And then we have a fall Mercury retrograde as well. It's in November. It starts early November. It ends at the end of November. And then there's lots of interesting stuff. A lot of it is not stuff that I think will be remembered in the annals of history. I really like the second half of October and the first part of November. We've got that Jupiter's in Cancer, which it'll be for a while, but then we also have Venus in Libra. And so just as when Mars and Saturn are both powerful at the same time, you get a general level of suck as kicked off 2020. When both benefics are in signs where they're very strong at the same time, there's a little bit more sweet relief available, right? There is beneficence, both grand and personal, as part of the story. So I like that. I'm personally excited for the Mars in Scorpio, which is like end of September into early November. If you're a Mars fan and you like that flavor, it's going to be some fine vintage of Mars in Scorpio. Yeah. But the Mars is not everybody's friend and not to everyone's taste.
True, that's a good one. I like that. Of late, I've been experimenting with almost like using new age terms for it, like jumping onto the Jupiter and Cancer timeline. Like when you've got the choice between like, well, there are some benefic tracks and malefic tracks I could run down. I'm going to run down the benefic ones and just almost just set intentions to live 60-40 more on that side rather than the other as part of allowing it into your life. And there are, as you say, there's some good options to play with that for H2. Hooray.
Yeah. So back to that benefic track, right? With Jupiter in Cancer, right? Jupiter's basically in as good a position as it ever gets for aiding you in seeing what you really need in that area, and the logical follow-up to that is if we're doing magic or prayer or not worrying so much about the boundary between those two, then asking for what you really need once you know what it is. And that sort of divine beneficence, or we just say like theurgical orientation, is also peak Jupiter. Jupiter, we have this this overlap with Jupiter and Zeus-like figures, and that's not wrong, but that doesn't successfully enclose all of what Jupiter is. In thousands of years of text, with Jupiter, you have the priest figure, right? And the priest is the figure who is most, if they're not a false priest, it's literally the human role that is most connected to and has the most sort of dialogue with the divine. Right. And you have that in Christian texts, in Muslim texts that are astrological, and in Vedic astrology, the primary god that is associated with Jupiter, even though the Zeus-like Indra is associated, but the primary one is Brihaspati, who is a priest, but who's literally a priest who arranges the rituals for the gods themselves to connect to even higher powers, and to arranges things so that their rituals will be successful. So you've got like this meta. Even the gods have to arrange ceremony correctly to get good results.
That's good. I like that. Awesome. All right. Well, anything else we need to talk about for H2?
Not that I can think of. I mean, we could talk about 100 things, but I don't feel like there's any like glaring, dangling, raw, frayed ends.
All right, that we can cut off with the chainsword that we have pulled out of the gape. All right, so what have you got going on? Tell us about your H2 then, sir.
Okay, so gonna get that book that I wrote 10 years ago out. Made a huge amount of progress in H1.
Right. Very good.
No dates promised yet. Made a huge amount of progress. Gonna get there. Gonna teach some classes. You can join my 3-year program. I will be having an enrollment towards in the second half of July. I haven't picked the day yet. If you would like to be alerted, join the mailing list at my website at coppock.com. I don't mail you very often. It's only when there are actual things. And let's see, I'll be teaching and writing. I've got teaching and writing that I've done before that's on the website. I will be quite busy with Sphere and Sundry. There are a lot of there are a lot of small but ripe fields that we are going to harvest and collect the goodies from during H2. Sphere and Sundry is a I guess traditional astrological materia project. It is a seller of fine incenses, oils, hydrosols, candles, etc. Anything that you would use magically consecrated, charged candles and oils and such for sigil activation, anointing candles, all your things. We've been going since 2018 and have a pretty good library. Everything that's created is created in a tiny, often less than 1 hour window around an extremely particular moment for a planet or star. It's locked in there. So, it's the bottled good times. at least
Yeah.
as far as one planet is concerned, whatever its idea of good times are. Jupiter's idea of good times will probably coincide with yours. Saturn's might be at odds, or it might be
You got to
just
be in the mood.
just your speed. Yeah, well, or you got to have Capricorn rising.
That's true. That's true. Awesome. That sounds amazing. Yeah, I like the word project because for the shadow work project, the shaman's devil, it's either a container or a project because it's but project
It's
for
interesting.
experience and like adventure. Project is the right word. It's some kind of like exploration. It's not commercial enough. Project, I think, is right.
Yeah, it's a project. It's a project, right? And vessels are filled as a result. Your containers are filled as a result of the project, and then they're emptied, never to be replenished, right? Because what filled them was that moment, and when the remains of that moment are exhausted, then that's that. The project has moved on. The project is pacing with the planets, quite literally.
Love it. Well, all right, sir. Yeah, what a 6 months we have in store.
I mean, honestly, other than there'll be a few moments like in like right now, things are pretty fluttering and chaotic, and then again, I will be shocked if the Uranus ingress doesn't give us another shot of that, and then the first half of August has some exclamation points for me. But all of that said, I think it'll be less eyebrow raising than the first half of the year. I don't think we're going to escalate like we've escalated, right? And so now our our collective baseline is crazier than it was, or at least more externally crazy than it was. I don't think we're going to escalate the same amount, but we do have a higher starting point. But I don't expect the bar to get raised like it was in the first half. I will be very surprised.
Okay, good. Maybe I can start having caffeine again. Awesome. Yeah. Well, sir, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. And yeah, well, we'll speak in the next one.
All right. Well, thanks for having me.